Good evening, everyone. Can you please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with us? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to our September Village Board meeting. We're going to start off the day with some staff reports. And I'll start with my mayor's report first really quickly. I want to thank DPW. They're not done. They're still working, but they have done a great job. I hope you've noticed adding sidewalks on Altamont Boulevard and working on Severson. I'm not sure if that got done yet since I've gone back to work. So they're not done with that one. Sunset Drive, we talked about last month at our meetings. It was supposed to be paved and we lost our paving group, but we have secured another one, so that will be done in September as well. Neighbors there will be getting a letter about the road being redone. They were very excited because they haven't had that in so many years. So chipping away at that. You'll notice, not ready for tonight, I'm sad to say, but the new parking lot, we've been needing an extension for so many years. We've talked about it. They budgeted for it, and this will be great for not only meetings that we need more parking, but community events like the library gala or voting. Those days, you know that parking's so limited. It will be open probably by the election in the fall is what we're thinking. Still more work to do on it. There's some trees that will be planted out there in the spring next year, but it will provide some new space for us. So we thank DPW, Jeff, Larry, and all the guys for doing such a great job. I'm going to go on to police department. I'm not sure if Chief is here. I don't see him yet, so there's probably not a report.
He is due. He's just finishing my call in the office.
Excellent. Well, if he has a report, he can wave to us up there, okay? We'll give him a minute. Altamont Fire Department, we have a submitted report. They're not here this evening because they are meeting at this very moment in the courtroom. So we will, does anybody have questions that you want to address the chief afterwards? Or are we good with what we have? Are you good? All right, I'll go back to Chief QC. Did you have anything for us? No? Excellent. Thank you. Archives and Museum, we do have an update on something new, and John's going to read that for us.
Hello, everybody. The Village of Altamont Museum and Archives will be hosting an evening event on Saturday, October 12th, in conjunction with New York State Path Through History Weekend. The Museum and Archives will host the first annual Founders Day celebration. Founders Day celebration, Saturday, October 12th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. During the day on Saturday, October 12th, the Village of Altamont Archives and Museum will host a Founders Day celebration. Patrons part in the middle in the village's Museum in the Street walking exhibit. The Village of Altamont is the first location in New York State west of the Hudson River to open a museum in the streets. A gateway to the Helderbergs, Altamont is a beautiful, preserved Victorian-era village with the original B&H depot surrounded by orchards and rolling countryside. The village has partnered with Museum in the Streets to create a self-guided walking tour of historic buildings and spaces. The tour provides photos and narratives in English and Spanish that describes rich history of the village. For more information, please visit the Museum in the Streets website and altamontvillage.org. Once the walking tour is over, participants will have a chance to visit the museum on the Village Museum and Archives, where they can see a new series of exhibits that have been assembled to give some background about Altamont's incorporation. There will be information about the first trustees and about the origin of Altamont. There's a Founders Day reception from 2 to 4. Museum visiting hours will follow by the reception, including refreshments. During the reception, visitors will have a chance to identify unknown photos of Altamont or take a photo challenge to possibly win a gift, a gift certificate to one of Altamont's local businesses. We need volunteers for that day to do a number of different jobs before and during the event. Anyone interested in volunteering can email Dan Barker at barker.danielj@gmail.com.
Which is on our website, so you can get his address there. Dan couldn't be here this evening, but he and the dedicated group of volunteers, many of them are here tonight, have been working for this weekend, so put it on your calendars if you're around, and come down and kind of take part in the events. It would be great. Okay, let me move on. Let's see. Public Works.
mention that we're going to have our meter readings wrapped up this week. Only a couple of days left doing that. As you said, we wrapped up our sidewalk program for the year. We're back to patching streets. We're on our Calvert right now. We've got to touch up Sunset before they come and pay. We're going to be back over here doing the side streets. They took a bad hit this winter. We're due, beginning of next month to start a hydrant flushing, and I'll bring that up again at the next board meeting.
Can I ask a quick question? I know it's not yet, and I'm glad, but the leaf pickup, what kind of week does that usually start on in October? At the end or in the middle? Do you remember the?
I don't remember what I'm looking at like that.
Okay, it's probably mid-October is what I'm thinking. Maybe.
We're picking up bags of these year round.
Right.
The factory.
I like when we get to the factory part.
It's a lot easier.
A lot easier. Okay, thank you. Anybody have questions? No? Okay, thanks so much. I'm gonna go to the treasurer's report. I think we've all had a chance to review the abstract for the last month and a half or so. Could I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
So moved is John,
I will second.
and Dean is second. And can I have roll call, please?
Trustee Whalen?
In favor?
Trustee Ganance?
In favor.
Trustee Farrakhan?
In favor.
Trustee Scally?
In favor.
Mayor Denine.
In favor. At this time, we always have a public comment period during our meetings where you can come up and share your thoughts on something that's going on in the village. I will ask that if you are commenting this evening for our public hearing, to save your comments until that time. And for the evening, because there's so many people that want to be heard, no different than we've done last time when we've had large crowds, we are limiting public comment to 2 minutes. Michelle? She will keep time for everybody who's up there, and if you're getting close to the end, she'll give you kind of a little hand signal to let you know. But if you have something besides the public hearing Stewart's application that you'd like to speak on, and you want to come to the mic, please come up. Tell us your name and where you live in the village of Altamont.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jim Pollard, 113 Large Street in Altamont. Our street's very, very narrow, and we're having a lot of problems in the past few years. Streets blocked off, middle of the day, middle of the night. Fire truck can't get through, ambulance can't get through. Sunday, we couldn't get through. People were very indignant when we asked them to move their cars. I don't have the answer, unfortunately, so I'm looking at you guys for the answer. The other thing is, for some reason, people like to block my driveway off. Is there a possibility we could get a no parking sign at the end of my driveway?
I would think that, first I'm gonna ask you a question, if you don't
Sure.
mind. The street was blocked off on Sunday?
Yeah, they were having a party, so people park, and they park on the street.
Oh,
So when you take two cars side by side,
yeah, I understand, yeah.
nobody goes.
Which shouldn't be. I would say right now, and if I'm wrong, Chief will correct me, but I think if that happens, if you call the Altamont Police, because people obviously can't park in front of your driveway.
He's aware of it, especially
Oh.
in the wintertime, and has done nothing.
Okay.
This has been going for 3-4 years.
Let me talk with Chief about it. I'll touch base back with you,
Okay.
if that's okay, and let's let him and I talk about this and then the board and see if we can come up with a solution.
Okay, what about a no parking sign at the end of my
Well, that's what I'm
driveway?
saying, see if that is something that we want to consider, putting on the road someplace. I know the road is narrow, and I know that is one of the roads that we have on our radar we have to fix several things on the
Mhm.
sidewalk, road, and drainage. It's on the list, coming up soon, I hope. But let me talk to the chief and just see, I don't know the regulations about the no parking, what we have to do with the process and all that. But let me talk with him this next week, and I will definitely contact you.
But even in the wintertime, the snowplows have to go around the cars and
Absolutely.
park.
Yeah, and then we don't have winter
the wrong
parking.
place.
We may have to step up.
If there's a car parked in front of his driveway and calls the police, we'll take it and tow it.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's what I was thinking to start, because they can absolutely tow, ticket, tow it, the whole thing. But we'll have a conversation, and then I'll get back to you, okay? Thank you. Anybody else have anything? No? Oh, I do, sorry. I didn't see. It's a long walk. Yeah, you can pull it up if you want.
That's all right. I'm used to shrinking for stuff like this. My name is Mike Mayer. I live at 149 Bosenville Road. I just want to bring to the attention of the type of drag strip that Bosenville is by my home. I am like right near the exit to the village. I see the police sitting there once in a while, but I don't know if there's anything else that can be done to it. Maybe those signs that report your speed or something like that to make people aware that they are speeding. I have a 4-year-old that plays in the driveway, so
Right.
I just want, to be, I know it's 30 for like another quarter mile up the road. People come down the hill flying, people come up the road. As soon as they crest right around that turn, right in front of my house, they just take off. Lots of people flying up the hill. So.
There are, and I live very close to that as well. A lot of the neighbors have talked about that, and I know the department has been aware of it. They have actually written a majority of tickets on that road. And the Boulevard has sometimes the same issue because it's the straightaway. So we're continuing to work on it, and I'll see if we can. We talked about getting some of those signs and see if we can purchase some or budget for them, which gives people their speed as they come by.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think that looks like, all right, I think we're good. I'm gonna move on to item number 1, and I'm going to, well, I think it's a public hearing on Tuesday, September 3rd at 7 to consider local law number 2 of the Village of Altamont. Could I ask our council to please read the posting to open the public hearing?
Sure, Mayor. This was a public notice that was published in the local newspaper. Reads as follows: Village of Altamont, notice of public hearing on proposed local law. Notice hereby given that for purposes of rezoning a certain tax parcel containing about 0.17 acres of land known as 107 to 109 Helmsburg Avenue as a central business district. A public hearing will be held by the Village Board Trustees of the Village Office, 115 Main Street, Altamont, New York, 12009 on September 3rd, 2019, commencing at 7 p.m. Consider the enactment of the proposed local law described below. Proposed local law number 2 of 2019, the Village of Altamont, repealing local law number 1 of 2018 and amending the official zoning map. The local law 1 describes the authority of the village board to rezone the parcel in question. 2 describes the purposes of local laws, repealing local law number 1 of 2018 and amending the official zoning map to move the parcel of land from the R10 to the CBD zoning district. 3 repeals local law number 1 of 2018. 4 provides for the amendment of the official zoning map to move 107 to 109 Helmsburg Avenue from the R10 to the CBD zoning district. 5 establishes the effective date of local laws of filing. Date of filing with New York State Secretary of State. Copies of the local laws described above are on file in the office of the village clerk, where it's available for public inspection during regular business hours. All persons interested will be given the opportunity to be heard on said proposed local law public hearing dated August 22nd, 2019, or the village or the Village of Altamont. Patricia Blackwood, village clerk.
And what I'd like to do is this, if the board is okay with that, I'd like to ask the applicant to come and give us a presentation or whatever we want, a short presentation on the application and some of the elements that we're talking about for this zoning change. I think Mr. Marshall is here for Stewart's, and there may be some folks talking about traffic as well. When the presentation is completed, the board, if you want to ask questions then, or if you want to wait, and we'll let the public, offer their thoughts at that point, and then we'll move on from there.
Good evening, I'm Chuck Marshall from Stewart's. Most of you know that because my name recognition here seems to be higher than in my hometown. But I want to let everyone know, I really think, I know that there's become like signs of this Stewart's, anti-Stewart's, pro-Stewart's, and from the Stewart's perspective, we're a place where people go for coffee and ice cream. We have a community element. We're not going anywhere. Like, whatever the situation that comes out of tonight is, or in the future, we're going to work through it. We did so in 2018. We did so at the planning board, the zoning board, overturned interpretations, the potential litigation. We'd like to minimize the number of gyrations that this may take, but this is really the first step. So with me tonight is Leah Everhart. Leah is an attorney at Miller, Manning, Shackner, and Hafner. She's an expert in the state environmental quality review. And Mark Nadolny from Peyton Manning, Carmen, the manager, and Joe from the shop, who are your local stewards representatives. Because of the turns that this has taken, I think it's best to let Mark speak first, because one of the major elements that came up in December was the traffic. So Mark will walk us through the traffic study Creighton Manning did for the revised plan.
Thanks, Chuck. As Chuck noted, my name is Mark Nadolny. I work for Creighton Manning Engineering, and we were asked to conduct a traffic assessment of how much additional traffic the proposed redevelopment would generate. Essentially what we did was we looked at the number of pumps is going to remain the same. However, the size of the convenience store will increase by approximately 640 square feet. Therefore, we did a comparison between what a store that's approximately 30 or 2,700 square feet would generate compared to a store that is 3,300 square feet would generate. And we took that comparison to see how much additional traffic we could expect out on the adjacent roadways. Now, we have to understand that a store like Stewart's is not a land use that attracts trips all on its own. It's a lot of pass-by trips. In the traffic world, we talk about pass-by trips, and what those mean is when someone's driving to work or coming home from work, they stop at Stewart's on their way home, or they stop at Stewart's on the way to work to get their cup of coffee. So it's not a new trip on the network. So while we acknowledge that there's going to be more turns in and out of the store, because they're going to provide more amenities, a lot of the trips are already existing on the existing roadway network. It's just they're just turning into the store where before they would pass by, because maybe the store doesn't provide lactose-free ice cream, or they'll provide that in the future. So if someone on the way home will. So those are not new trips to the network. However, the store will attract new trips. Someone may live on Prospect and they'll say, well, you know what, I'm going to go, the store's a little nicer, instead of going to the grocery store, I'll go to Stewart's instead. And they will attract new trips just for the sheer size of the store that's increasing. So based on engineering standards of other similar type convenience stores, we anticipate the increase of about 600 square feet to add approximately 10 new trips to the network during the morning and afternoon peak hours. So while the store may attract more turns in and out of the store, new traffic coming in from the area is about 10 trips during those peak hours, the morning and afternoon peaks during the commuter times. In perspective, if you look at the amount of traffic on the existing roadway, there's about 400 to 600 trips on the existing roads during those peak times. When you're talking about 10 new trips, you're talking about an increase of 1 to 2% of traffic on the roadway network. So you're not going to be able to tell the difference with the additional 10 trips. I mean, the daily fluctuation of traffic is more. From a Tuesday to a Wednesday to a Thursday, traffic on these roadways will fluctuate day to day, and it's more than what you're actually going to see new trips going to this store. Like I said, you're going to see more turns in and out, but in terms of new traffic to the area, it's going to be fairly minor. So those were the conclusions of our trip generation assessment. We did get a review letter from Nan Stolzberg from Community Planning Environmental Associates. And based on this letter, I'm just going to take a couple of some of the statements. One of these statements was the proposed redevelopment will not degrade existing pedestrian and bike accommodations. And while I agree that it won't degrade, I think the store would actually help pedestrian accommodations. And that when I say that, is right now we've got 3 curb cuts to the site. The proposed redevelopment will actually reduce one of those curb cuts, so you'll minimize the amount of exposure that pedestrians have to cars. So it'll actually improve pedestrian connectivity by comment letter also suggests that there's no potential adverse impacts as a result of the development with regard to traffic. So again, this was reviewed by Community Planning Environmental Associates. They didn't see any adverse impacts to the adjacent roadway network with regard to the additional traffic to the system. So it's pretty much a summary of what we looked at, and then I'll turn it back to Chuck or Leah to go through some of the environmental.
Good evening. I know Chuck introduced me already. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I know Chuck introduced me already. My name is Leah Everhart. I'm an attorney. We're doing some work for Stewart's in this application, but most of our time we actually spend in aiding municipal boards through the conduct of SEQA review in order to make sure that they comply with SEQA regulations and in the best, most appropriate way forward. We are going to speak a little bit about the rezoning, mostly about SEQA, but we're going to start with just a little bit of housekeeping. First, we wanted to mention that there are some boards up in the back of the room. Those are not put up by stewards. We have some concerns about the accuracy of some of them. We just don't want there to be any confusion. Whoever put those up, it wasn't stewards. So if they're helpful to the board, wonderful, but they're not from stewards, and as far as we know, they're not from the village either. From the board's perspective, this probably seems like a little bit of deja vu, since the board already conducted SEQA review and already adopted a local law to amend the zoning in the way that's being proposed here tonight. As a result of that rezoning effort, there was some litigation, and there were a number of procedural claims raised in the context of that litigation. And in an abundance of caution, we understand that this board has decided to reopen that review effort. To give this a fresh look, and we very much appreciate the board in doing so. We realize how much time it takes to begin with, let alone to go back and do it all again. So we appreciate that there's a real desire to get this done the right way, to evaluate the right things, to reach appropriate conclusions, and to make sure the proper procedure is followed. Just today we were made aware of a letter that was submitted by the village's consultant. We're not in a position because of such short time to be able to provide feedback on that. If we have time, we certainly will, but we do want to just maybe provide the proper context in which we're hoping that the board may receive that sort of information just like it receives any other information tonight. We understand that the letter was submitted by a consultant of this board, of this village. Perfectly appropriate, obviously boards are allowed to have consultants. Mr. Hartzell's a consultant, I'm a consultant, certainly it's appropriate. We're a little concerned though about the scope of the guidance, sometimes the tone of the guidance and sometimes the substance of the guidance. We would like to remind the board that from a SEQA perspective, you all are the experts. You're the board with the expertise. When you take in opinions, you're certainly allowed to, but you're not allowed to delegate your substantial authority and basically just look to the opinions of consultants, engineers, attorneys even, whomever, planners. Certainly it's appropriate to take in and evaluate those opinions, but not blindly. There are some opinions that were offered to you that we wholeheartedly agree with, and some that we find very troubling or disconcerting about the recommended determinations that were set forth. And again, we're not going to get into great detail just because it's so long. We hope to be able to do that in writing at a future time if it's relevant. We would like to mention, though, that there is no disagreement between us and the village consultant on the type of secret action this is. There are 3 types. There are type 1 actions, which tend to be the large projects, and Colony Center would be an obvious example. There are type 2 actions, which are exempt from SEQA review. Constructing your single-family home is a good example. Those are assumed not to have any impacts at all. And then in the middle are this wide variety of actions that don't fall into either category, and they're called unlisted actions, and that's where we are tonight. SEQA begins with review of an environmental assessment form. That's a form that has 3 different parts. The first part's filled out by the applicant. When an action is a type 1 action, the big kind of action, a very long form is required of the applicant. The only other type of action that requires a form is what we are, unlisted action, and there's a short form that can be used for that. Stewards appropriately filled out the short form and submitted it to the board for consideration. One of the recommendations this board has received is, first of all, confirmation from your consultant that we're right, that that's appropriate, but also a further recommendation that the board go above and beyond and require some further submission. Both the long environmental assessment form, even though we don't think that's necessary, and some other materials. But focusing for a moment on the long environmental assessment form, we would really request that the board not obligate stewards to submit that. There's two reasons. One is that we're concerned about unnecessary delay where this board is already going above and beyond what it's obligated to do to make sure that procedural rules are abided by. But more importantly, because nobody's here, I doubt there are many people here who have no idea what stewards is proposing. In particular, the board, as far as I'm aware, there's no real great mystery as to what stewards is proposing. It is true that the long form EAF has many more questions that need to be asked. We doubt that it would elicit information that you don't already have. Certainly, if there is information you don't already have, perhaps we can supplement it. Obviously, if you require us to submit a long form, we will do so. We would just ask that unless there is information that would be elicited by that form that you think you need, please don't just require it of us as a matter of course. As far as the ultimate review effort that the board will be undertaking, we're a little concerned about the manner in which your consultant has evaluated potential impacts. What we mean by that is what's being proposed here is moving the boundary between the R10 zoning district and the CBD zoning district over by one property. Nobody's proposing that the board create an island of a zoning district just for stewards. We're just trying to move the boundary over by one parcel. Not to suggest that there will absolutely be no impacts and every answer you give should be in favor of no impacts. That's not what we're saying. But when one evaluates whether or not there will be a significant impact, if one were to do that based only on the most outspoken project opponent and how they subjectively may feel about the level of impact, that would obviously skew the results of SEQR review. And that would be the case in any project, any development project whatsoever. The closest neighbor will obviously be the one that may feel impacts the most acutely. That doesn't necessarily mean, just because they may be viewed as significant to any one member of the community, or maybe any two members of the community, that doesn't mean that from a SEQR perspective, they rise to the very high level of significant environmental impacts. So we're a little concerned that in evaluating potential impacts from light and noise and the like, that it seems like your consultant was focusing mostly on how those things would be viewed from a single parcel. Certainly that should be considered. We're just suggesting that shouldn't be such an obtuse review of impacts, and that a broader look to really evaluate how significant the impacts really are should be considered. Finally, the determinations that the board will ultimately reach either tonight or at a future meeting. We'd really like the board to focus on what courts will identify as the standard, which is the rule of reason. You all have expertise, you all have a lot of discretion in identifying what types and levels of impacts there may be, but the rule of reason really requires that those determinations be reasonable based upon the record. In terms of the actual zoning amendment, I mentioned before that we're not proposing an island in the middle of a residential zoning district. In the course of the litigation, there was an allegation that the zoning change, that by moving that property line over and rezoning the parcel that we're seeking to rezone, that somehow that was inconsistent with the village's comprehensive land use plan. And just to be clear, a comprehensive land use plan, as you all know, you've developed it. It is the skeleton of zoning, really. It's identifying the shared plans and goals of the community. It's usually a very general document. I don't know of one that has been so specific to define the boundary line between zoning districts, and I don't believe yours is that specific either. So we don't believe that there is an inconsistency between the comprehensive land use plan and the proposed zoning law. And we don't think any allegations along those lines are particularly reasonable or well-founded. With that, Chuck, did you have anything further? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna play wedding singer. I'm gonna bring this over. This is the, someone wants to use, this is an existing survey. Should someone wanna come up and point to, any features, and then these are the plans. There were some revisions. I'm gonna walk you through them. Some of them stem from the interpretations that we received, and then, you know, what happens when they're subsequently overturned. So one of the comments that Nan had raised was that we proposed 3 signs, only one building sign and one freestanding sign are allowed. We actually don't propose 3 signs. We only propose 1 freestanding sign, which is compliant in square footage. It is deficient in its placement, so we will need variances for that. Go hold on 1 second, sorry. So this is the proposed site plan. There are not to scale versions of this provided by me on 11 by 17 paper in the back. But what you have in the sign is it's in this general vicinity here. This is the existing Stewart store, and this is the existing house. The existing Stewart store is 2,700 square feet. The proposed is 3,340, which on the front elevation consists of 1,600 square feet of sale floor and 1,500 square feet of storage area. Approximately 122 square feet is a storage shed accessible from the outside only. When Stewart sought the interpretations, some of those were since overturned and some of them remain. A couple of things changed. So the maximum or the required square footage for a gasoline fueling station is 40,000 square feet. The proposed Stewart's is 33,958. So we will need a variance for that. Should, again, everything's under the assumption that this goes forward. But one of the things that changed is the minimum width for frontage has increased. So we've traded variances there as you look at the overall impact that the plan has with the adopted or existing zoning. When going to a gasoline fueling station, there's a minimum distance from the pumps of 35 feet. Both sets of pumps are now compliant. However, the setback from the residential of 50 feet is now deficient, and we'll need a variance for that. One of the things that came up in going to the Zoning Board of Appeals was the lighting. The overall plan is compliant with the average. The overall plan is compliant with the average as determined in the code. However, under the canopy, there is intensity which exceeds the average. Again, one of the things that we'll have to work through is that number of meet the average. How do you deal with the exceedance and the under? But we propose a series of LED, all lights are LEDs. We propose back shielded fixtures along the creek side. We propose no soffit lighting or exterior lighting along the property that, or the side of the building that would face 111 Helderberg Ave. One of the things that Nan mentions in her letter that I think is a relevant point and something that people have to consider, and this is kind of an example of the overall development of the site, is the dumpster. So the dumpster does get closer to the residential property line. The problem is, as a development instrument, the dumpster can really only go here or here. And that's because the dumpster has to be picked up with a truck that approaches straight, lifted, dumped, the truck backs up, and then exits. So you have to position the dumpster where it can be, cleared in that manner. The zoning it mentions specifically that it should be placed to the rear of the building. Now here, that approaches the residential zone. If it was put out here, it would be in front of the building, which would make it not compliant with the zoning. But that's an element of the planning process. The planning board, through its discretion, has the ability to say, we would rather have the dumpster screened differently and put in front of the building than we would have the dumpster closer to the residential zone. Again, the overall development here is to use the mass of the building to screen the remaining residents that exist on the Helderberg Avenue side of the property. I'll just go through the landscaping plan real quick, and that'll be it. So in the landscaping plan, when we originally submitted, I did spend about 45 minutes going through the plan. I never know the name, with Carol. One of the elements that she was concerned with was the placement of a 6-foot fence immediately adjacent to her property line, as that would prohibit access to her hedgerow. So one of the things now with the interpretation as gasoline fueling and the requirement to move the building further, call it east, northeast, is that we can now, again, through the planning process, we can now put a fence instead of surrounding the individual components, and then put the fence closer to the Stewart store, and then provide a visual buffer with increased landscaping along the rear line. But we do still propose taking down the existing tree line between the Stewarts and the house of 107 Helderberg. And then, as you see, any area here that's green will be green on the plan. So with that, I think I've answered most of my questions, or the questions I would anticipate. If there are questions after the public comment the board would like me to specifically answer, I would love to do so.
No, and I'll just clarify that, and I apologize that we threw something at you so late in the game. We did not receive it till yesterday. It was a thought, we wanted to, get as many recommendations or opinions from people that work with planning. Our planning board gave us recommendations. Obviously, Albany County sends us back recommendations. We had not asked our consultant, our planner, who helped us shape our comprehensive plan this time. So just recently, asked her if she would have a chance to review the plan. I didn't think she was going to fit it in, honestly, because we got to her later than I had hoped. But she was good enough to accept, and we received it yesterday. So the board received it yesterday. And we haven't had a chance to go through the whole thing either, but I sent something on to Stuart that's also in the back of the room, just so they'd have an idea. And again, these are recommendations. These are, this is not what we have to follow, but we same with the other recommendations from the other boards, et cetera. So that's what we've been referring to, and so I do apologize for just emailing it to you, but I wanted you to have it, just so you know everything that we know.
And that's why, one of the big ones, and this has kind of been a discussion that's happened repeatedly. This is the village's established historic district. In her letter, Nan indicates that, and it's somewhat a function of databases, of which I don't purport to use. But when you use the short environmental assessment form, which is, again, as Nan indicated, the appropriate form for an unlisted action, the environmental assessment form mapper, which is a DEC self-populating function, does not list the property immediately contiguous to the established historic district for the village. When you use the full environmental assessment form, it does come in as contiguous to the village's established historic district. So one of the things I want to point out, this is where the project is and the established district. So when people talk about where the established district is, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone in the board have anything right now that you want to ask Mr. Marshall, or no? Open up to the public. So at this time, if you have a comment that you'd like to share with the board, we're here really tonight to listen. We're not going to have a debate or question and answer because there's so many of you that want to share your ideas that we want to make sure we can get everything in a timely manner, continue on to what the other work we have to do with this application, and then of course conduct other business that's on the agenda for this evening. So, yes. We'll have to, we don't know. I'm not planning one or not planning one. It all depends on what's going on. We have to go through seeker, which is timely, so we'll see. I think the seeker might take us on some, we'll see. So it may take us on, depending on seeker and our discussion. It could be tonight, it could be finished up at the next meeting, the seeker portion. Keeping in mind, again, we have 14 other items or 13 other items on there. I'd like to remind you, and I'm not, it'll probably sound like I'm talking down to you, and I don't mean that at all. I'm a teacher, most of you know that, and today was the first day of school for teachers. Kids come on Thursday, and I have to get ready for what I'm going to say to my 8 classes that come in on Thursday morning. And one thing I really make sure I explain to them, we have a good time on that first day, but I save room at the very beginning and or the end, wherever I want to fit it in, about my expectations for them. And my expectations that I have for all of us here tonight are, please share your opinions. Please listen to others who may not have the same opinion. It doesn't mean you're wrong or they're wrong. It's just an opinion, and we want to hear them all. We had a real issue with people, if you want to say heckling others that stood up after you already had your opportunity to talk, and it's just very disrespectful. Manners matter all the time. Respect always. And we've always been that way here. This board has operated that for the 14 years that Dean and I have been here. We've never had an issue till that meeting. And I was really disappointed to see that. So I'm talking to you like you're my kids for Thursday. This was good practice for me because this is kind of what I'm going to say to them when I see them Thursday morning. So please, be respectful of each other because we are the same community. It's a great community. And we can disagree. We have disagreed, but we work well together. And that's the whole point. So, yes.
Just a quick point of order. It's been 14 years?
I think it's a little over now.
It feels like 17.
It does. Yeah, it does. We're both a little grayer and different
Yeah.
kids.
Thank you.
I think, you know what, I think maybe I'll move the microphone a little bit over, just so we can.
I was gonna say for mechanics, people wanna line up so we can distribute.
Okay, Michelle's gonna move the microphone over so they can, people, okay, or our council is. I knew we brought you.
Really, I just, yeah.
He really is. Thank you, John. And so if Michelle gives you a little wave, it means you're coming, you know, to the end of your time. So come on up, tell us who you are, and yeah, she'll be good at it. Tell us who you are and where you reside in the village. Thank you. Bend it down a little if you need to. You can do that too. Mr. Marshall, what just happened there?
Now I'm gonna have to say something nice about it. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay,